So I wanted to just hit on indoctrination again. I've talked about it before, but I just don't think I can talk about it enough. And I just think about my own experiences, and kind of, part of what motivates me to do the program is helping people get their lives back and getting their heads out of indoctrinated states. And so what I'd like to do is I've described it before, but I'm going to describe it again because I think it's important. I think it needs to be described. If you are a young person and you don't feel like you believe a God exists, but you're concerned about it, you're concerned about your immortal soul, you're afraid of hell, you're praying and begging for a sign, and you're asking God to please show you, that God exists, because you just, you keep going to church and they keep telling you about this, and you're just so worried and stressed out, and what if this is all true and I can't make myself believe it. And that's what indoctrination does to you. It works in such a way that it makes you pressure yourself when the pressure's not on. So when you're in church, you get the pressure, you get the hard sell of, you get the songs, and you get the preacher doing the call to baptism at the end, come on down and be saved. And when you're not at church, you've been taught to torture yourself. So that you will pressure yourself to try to make yourself believe.
Right.
And
there's a lot of standard traits of cultish behavior, from like isolating you from your friends and family if they are non-believers, and also like love bombing people and blasting sort of music or rhythmic chanting at them while they're there kind of breaks down your resistance.
And that sort of separation from other people doesn't have to be a physical thing. I mean, when a lot of times we think about like Amish societies where they have their own sort of secluded areas where they'll stay and they have their own sort of culture, but it doesn't have to be that way. I can remember when I was in church being taught over and over again that we're in the world but not of the world, that the world is this separate thing, and that people that weren't in the church were worldly and they were of the world. And so even though you interacted with them and you were in that, you had to see yourself as separated. So they accomplished the same thing mentally without actually pulling you out of society.
Even sticking with the example of the Amish, like the Amish have this thing called, isn't that an Amish thing, Rumspringa, where they get to go out in the world when they come of age, and they go out and they hang out for like a week or a month or something like that, and then they get to decide whether to come back or not. But the thing is, they've lived their entire lives in this Amish community.
The deck is stacked.
Yeah, and it's not like, a guy with no friends and no connections going out in the middle, going out into the world and like not being familiar with anything out there is going to have a terribly good first impression.
Correct.
And there's a very high return rate.
And again, even when you're involved in a situation where someone's indoctrinated you and trying to indoctrinate you still, you will have a similar experience, except that it's not that open, it's not that obvious. So what happens is they raise you with all these Bible truths, and they'll raise you with this really messed up view of everything, basically telling you that human beings are basically bad, that human beings are not trustworthy, that your reason is not true. You can't trust your own reason. You have to have faith because God knows better. God knows better, morally. God knows better knowledge-wise. God knows all the stuff that you don't know, and so you just have to trust and you just have to obey. And the idea then is, you have all these things that you're taught, like you have this very stringent sexual model where you don't have any kind of sex, and it might have, depending on the teachings, they might tell you that it's wrong to even think about sex, or that. So all these things that are normal human things, you're being told this is all wrong and this is no good. And then what happens is you get out into the world and you're not believing, and you might try stretching your wings a little bit, and you do some things and you're not really prepared because you've never had somebody sit down and talk to you in a realistic way about sex or in a realistic way about life. And so they didn't sit you down and say, it's okay if you have these thoughts, it's okay if you have sex. We just want to make sure that you're being responsible and that you're being prepared and that you know what you're getting into, that you've thought this through and that you've considered it. So you get a lot of people that are raised in fundamentalist religions. They go out into the world and they may actually try like rebellion, or they may try to go out and do some things on their own and leave their church and leave those teachings. But they've never been prepared in any sort of realistic way to deal with real life. They've only been taught this very weird black and white, non-realistic framework of how the world works and how relationships work and what reality is. And
I'm reminded of one of my all-time favorite Onion stories. Okay. The headline is, "Horribly awkward first sexual encounter, worth the wait."
Yeah. No, I know that's a good one to actually bring up. But yeah, the concept is you'll try to go out and live life on your own without this teaching, and then when it doesn't work, that's sort of like in your head the test of it. And you come back and you're like, if I hadn't had sex, or if I hadn't done this thing or that thing that the church says I shouldn't have done, then everything would have been so much better, and look at the mess I've made, and I really can't run my life, and you know what, this religion really does know better. And so you go running back to this religion because it's comfortable and it's the only thing you've been taught. And yeah, it'll work to avoid the problems, sort of like, not eating will allow you to never eat anything poisonous, but it's not okay to go your whole life not eating because you don't want to eat something poisonous. You have to learn how to eat well. You have to learn how to do things well. You don't just avoid them like they're bad because there's certain risks involved. There's risks involved in everything you do in life. Anything you do in life. When you drive out of your driveway in the morning, you are taking a risk. Nobody says car accidents happen and the solution is no one should drive. Everyone needs to just cut up their driver's license and get rid of their cars and scrap them because driving is evil. Just look at all the deaths on the road and the injuries and the accidents and the cost involved in this horrible system we have of transporting cars. You could paint anything horrible if you just look at the negatives and you never look at how to do it safely.
And if you did have some crazy anti-driving cult and people listened to them, you wouldn't come up with decent solutions like traffic laws and interstate highways and stoplights and things.
Yeah, I mean, in the church, they actually will say that if you're having sex and you're using birth control or condoms, that you are trying to, quote, avoid responsibility. Mm-hmm. They'll say that that's avoiding responsibility. No, that's being responsible.
In some cases, even if you're married, where you have the Quiverful movement encouraging people to just, have a baby every year.
But in their heads, anybody that has sex should be punished, and anybody that's, that is not having sex is doing the right thing. And so you don't have sex, it's 100%, you'll be safe and you won't have any of these problems like pregnancy and STDs. And it's the same as saying if you never drive, you're not going to have an auto accident. Well, it's true, but is that a realistic solution? No, it's not. It's completely asinine. And so they're teaching you some really messed up stuff, but it's going to work better than you going out on your own completely ignorant of how the world really works and then failing. And then when you run back, you say, okay, this did work. See, it's like it's evidence that it does work because it's so much better than when I tried it on my own. It's not a fair test. They have crippled you as far as going out there and actually testing it. I'm not saying that nobody can get out there and make a successful life outside of this that's been raised in an indoctrinated state. I'm talking specifically now to young people who are scared, that are scared of hell, that are scared of what's going to happen to your soul after you die, and all this fear. And what you want is God to send you some sign because you're having trouble making yourself believe, but you really want to believe because it would be so much better than all the stress and doubt that they have drilled into your head. And I'm sitting here today to tell you that I was that person when I was younger, and I am today not in the church. I don't believe in God, and I am not afraid. I'm not scared. And you can have that. You can have an existence where you choose non-belief, where you are not afraid, where you understand this isn't real, and that you're not in doubt. They try to tell you that anybody that's not doing this, you're going to spend your life in fear and doubt forever. No, you're not. You're not going to spend your life in fear and doubt any more than you spend your life in fear and doubt about vampires, right? And I used this example in an email recently where I was talking about how Pascal's wager is when they threaten you and say, oh, you've got so much to lose, and what if you're wrong? And it's like, what if I'm wrong about vampires and I'm not hanging garlic on my door and I get attacked by vampires? Well, I'm, whatever. I can't go around worrying about everything that somebody says exists that I don't have evidence exists and what it might do to me if I'm wrong. That would be an endless list of crazy. And so if you're not, ask yourself, if I'm not afraid of vampires and I'm not taking precaution for vampires, if I'm not sleeping with, a gun with a silver bullet every night in case the werewolves attack, and I'm not hanging garlic to keep the vampires at bay, why am I terrified of a hell when I don't believe in God, when I'm begging for a justification to believe because I just can't believe and I want to make myself believe? And there's no reason. This fear and this pressure that's coming out is coming out because someone has messed with your head. They have really messed with your head. And it's hard to see it because that's all you've known. But I'm telling you, that is a sign that you have been indoctrinated, that someone has put into your head a mechanism to pressure yourself when they're not around. And you can overcome that, and you can live and be happy and not be plagued by these doubts any more than you're plagued by stress about vampires or stress about werewolves or anything else like that. You can get past it. They're lying to you when they say you'll spend your life in fear and doubt. It's an absolute lie. You won't. And you can get over it. And I'm telling you that because I've done it. So I know it can be done. The other thing that I wanted to hit, that's my indoctrination speech.
I have not.
Have not what?
I have not had to get over religious indoctrinated specifically.
Yeah. But yeah, we get so many letters from people saying either they're afraid of hell or writing to us saying, thank you, I'm no longer afraid of hell.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when we get an email that says, I rationally don't believe in hell, but I'm still afraid of it. I'm not afraid of hell, and I never have been. So I feel like I should just kick that over to one of you guys.
Yeah. And when I did start to believe, it's really funny because when I finally, convinced myself, I got my quote sign or whatever, and it's embarrassing to even think what I would accept for justification. But when you're looking for anything to justify it, you'll accept whatever comes your way. So I took a really weak, quote sign. At the time, I thought it was, so much, and now looking back, it's just like that was pathetic. And that's why people often don't want to tell you why they really believe in God. They throw all these apologetics out at you, but they don't want to say, here's the real reason, because it's weak. And mine was weak as well. And so when I finally believed, let me tell you, the relief, the sense of relief. I didn't have to worry about hell anymore. I didn't have to worry about my immortal soul. There wasn't any what if I'm wrong. I know there's a God, and I was so comfortable with that. And thank you, God. You helped me get over all this stress and all this horror and all this uncertainty and doubt. And I didn't ever realize until much later in my life that all that stress and doubt was put into me to force me to adopt that belief, to take anything, and I could possibly take any crumb of anything to make myself say, okay, there's a God, because they wanted me to want to escape all that doubt. And so anyway, just saying that after the fact, while I was a Christian, if you would have told me that I had, adopted it because of fear, I would have said, no. It's about God's love. God loves us, and He helps us, and He saves us, and God is wonderful. God was wonderful because He saved me from all that horror, right? All that stress and that awful situation. And so I wouldn't, as a Christian, have admitted it, and I wouldn't have been lying. I just simply didn't see it that way then. But I see it clearly now, what was done. And I see it done to people all the time. And it's really distressing to see this done to children. But this is what they do to them. And when a Christian tells you that they don't fear, they're not kidding. But please notice how many times they use Pascal's wager. For people that aren't afraid, they sure are into, but what happens if you're wrong? And they sure are into, how do you not live your life in horror and doubt? I mean, don't you want to get rid of that doubt? And why are you seeking? And it's like, okay, you don't know me, because I'm not afraid. I'm not doubtful. I'm not seeking. I already been through that ringer, and I'm not going back into it. And it wasn't salvation from all that stress. You put the stress in me to make me adopt the belief. And I reject the belief now, and I reject the stress. I don't have either, and I'm fine. And you can be too. That's kind of my thing.
Hallelujah.